Liaquat Ahamed, Lords of Finance, the bankers who broke the world. Embark on a journey through the 1920s and 1930s, an era of significant economic turmoil, featuring boom, bust, and the onset of the Great Depression. In Lords of Finance, the bankers who broke the world, Liaquat Ahamed dives deep into the financial decisions and mistakes of central bankers from the US, Britain, Germany, and France, laying the blame on these influential figures and their stubborn allegiance to the gold standard. Discover how their misguided policies and actions created the perfect storm, leading to the most extensive financial catastrophe seen in modern history.
The Gold Standard and the Great Depression. The Great Depression of the 1920s and 1930s was not an inevitable result of uncontrollable events but a direct consequence of the poor decisions made by central bankers. The gold standard, which linked a currency's value to gold, was a widely accepted practice in the early 20th century, backed by the banks of the four major economies of the US, Britain, France, and Germany. However, the bankers' misguided policies of cutting rates when they should have raised them and sticking with the gold standard long past its usefulness resulted in the Great Depression. This book's summary tells the story of how central banking was a new concept for the world's largest economy and how the European powers' foolish wartime monetary policies led to towering debt and devalued currency. The rise and fall of Germany's currency. The German mark was at the center of the most destructive monetary event in human history. The onerous reparations that followed World War I helped spark a dizzying inflation and currency devaluation in Germany. The collapse of the mark led to a boon for foreigners and widespread starvation among Germans. Despite the grave situation, the belief in gold as the foundation for money was ingrained in the minds of policymakers, limiting their ability to recognize the inherent problems of adhering to the gold standard. With the US in a dominant position, it insisted on full payment of war debts from Britain and France, causing a downward spiral in Europe. Against this backdrop, Schacht became currency commissioner and oversaw the creation of a new currency, the Rentenmark, replacing the Reichsmark. Germany's economy soon rebounded, earning him the nickname Miracle Man. The gold standard and the fate of two economies. London was growing, but its economy was struggling due to high unemployment and deflation caused by disciplined fiscal policies aimed at reversing wartime inflation. Winston Churchill considered breaking away from the gold standard but ultimately sided with the gold bugs in the Treasury and the Bank of England. Meanwhile, France's culture of scandal and deep political divides weakened confidence in the franc, leading to a currency crisis. Émile Moreau took over as governor of the Banque de France and stabilized the franc by keeping it low, allowing French exporters to undercut their rivals. Although Moreau's strategy worked in the short term, it ultimately helped destabilize the world economy and led to quarrels with Norman, who claimed France was undermining the pound. The Great Depression and the misjudgments of policymakers. The late 1920s saw a new threat for bankers, rising equity prices, and Federal Reserve Chair Strong's decision to cut U.S. rates in 1927 hoping to bolster England's pound backfired. Instead, it led to an equity bubble that vacuumed capital out of every nation in Europe. Strong died in 1928, leaving his successor to deal with the stock market bubble. The idea of active monetary policy was so new that no one knew what to do. As the U.S. central bankers bickered, the stock market finally crashed. Following the crash, German banks collapsed, then U.S. banks fell. President Hoover was reluctant to intervene, but Roosevelt's first official act as U.S. president in 1933 was to close every U.S. bank. His bank holiday stopped the run on U.S. banks, and the U.S. went off the gold standard. Going off gold helped Britain, too. Its devalued currency spurred exports, lowered interest rates and led it out of the Depression. Roosevelt's broader point was completely accurate: the gold standard had outlived its time.
In conclusion, Lords of Finance elucidates that the Great Depression was not an inevitable consequence, but rather a disastrous result of the unfortunate decisions of central bankers from the four major powers at the time. Their failure to break free from the limitations imposed by the gold standard, combined with their inability to effectively tackle economic crises, led the world into the deepest financial abyss. This cautionary tale serves as a reminder of the immense power that central bankers hold and the catastrophic consequences that can ensue from their misjudgments and inability to adapt to changing times.